And gentlemen, if I can ask you to take your seats, please. It's now 2 o'clock and we'll make a start. So first of all, welcome to the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee for the 20th of January 2025. Just to note, as we work through the meeting, the public committee team will display the agenda and reports on the screens in the council chamber. So agenda item 1, welcome introductions and safety information. First of all, welcome members of the committee to the meeting. Just quickly mention that this meeting is being webcast. So as we also have members of the public, and as well as for the benefit of committee members, we're not expecting any fire alarm. If there is a fire alarm, please make your way calmly out of the front door that you just came in via the lobby area, turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral. The assembly point is in front of the cathedral. My name is Tony Dyer and I'm the chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. We also have Councillor Caroline Goots, who is the Vice Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, and on my right-hand side is Nick Hibbard, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Bristol City Council. So first of all, agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutions, and I don't believe we have any apologies or substitutions. So move on to agenda item 3. Do we have any declarations of interest? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor South Townsend just wanted to declare that I'm a member of ACORN.
Councillor Heather Mack, ditto.
Okay, thank you both. So, agenda item number 4, minutes of the previous meeting. I would like to move the minutes of the meeting of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee held on the 16th of December as the correct record. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Can I then ask the committee if they are content to confirm the minutes as correct record to be signed by myself as chair? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is chair's announcements. I have no announcements at this moment. Move on to agenda item number 6. Agenda item number 6 is public forum. We have up to 30 minutes available for public forum. We have received, and I'll do public questions first, we have received 3 public questions. All 3 are from Dan Ackroyd. Dan, you have 2 supplementary questions as well. Would you like to read the responses, or do you just want to go to your supplementaries?
Let's go straight to the supplementaries. Supplementary to my question 1. If I've understood the answer correctly, it says that a known mitigating action isn't currently listed in the corporate risk reports. So my question is, are there any other known mitigating actions that aren't listed in any of the corporate risk reports?
In most cases, there are ongoing mitigation actions. I think what the answer was is that a new one is being developed to more accurately reflect what's going forward. But I'll get clarification for that for you, Dan.
Okay, thank you. As supplementary to my question 3, the answer says 2 more additional staff are being recruited to undertake the work. The question is, what does that bring the total additional staff to since the start of last year to deal with the additional workload of CR 52 and CR 60?
I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I'll find out for you. Oops, sorry. We have 1 public statement, and that statement is from Wesley Bear on behalf of ACORN, I believe. Wesley?
Hello. Yeah. Okay. Let me just clear. You can hear me, Tony. Cool. So I'm here speaking as a member of ACORN, the community union, and we are deeply concerned about the proposed cuts to the council tax reduction scheme, which would place an unjust burden on the poorest residents of our city. Bristol needs you to step up and show the real leadership in these challenging times. You have promised time and again to defend the council tax benefit, a vital lifeline for many Bristolians, yet now you are suggesting the poorest among us pay for your poor financial management. If you cut this lifeline, you will be remembered for taking food off the tables of the lowest income and vulnerable Bristolian families. And this is not the leadership that Bristol deserves. You're speaking green, but you're acting blue. And it's time to be clear. Either you're on the side of the people of Bristol, or you're siding with the government which continues to bleed us dry. Cutting this lifeline would betray the very values you claim to uphold. And we demand you honour your commitments, protect this lifeline scheme and stand with the people of Bristol. Marcus Mosiah Garvey once said that we need leaders not in love with money, but in love with justice, not in love with publicity, but in love with humanity. So the choice is yours. Prove that you are willing to fight for a fairer, more equitable Bristol, or face the force of community spirit.
Thank you, Wesley. Okay, that's the end of public forum. We now move on to the first agenda item. Agenda item number 7 is about the Underfall Yard Trust Reinstatement Project, the collaboration agreement and project plan. So for the benefit of the committee, this report seeks approval of the new collaboration agreement and to provide delegated powers to the Executive Director, Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the committee chair, to approve the transfers of insurance proceeds from the insurer, Zurich Insurance Company Limited, to the Underfall Yard Trust project account. This is a key decision as it involves spend over £500,000, and I would like to invite Peter Anderson, Director of the Property, Assets and Infrastructure, and Tom Edges, Interim Head of Corporate Landlord, to introduce and outline the report. Pete, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So this, further to the devastating fire destroying the big shed and multiple workshops and 6 boats in May 23, the Council's been working very closely in partnership with the Underfall Yard Trust to work through a collaboration agreement initially, as the report suggests. That was brought in October 23, but also to work through the second collaboration agreement, which will enable us to passport the insurance proceeds to the Underfall Yard to basically build, develop and see through to completion in terms of bringing the Underfall Yard back to its original state. We have been working very hard with the Underfall Yard Trust, and the board's been created that does have a seat for the council on that board. We have the collaboration agreement as part of the document bundle that you've got in front of you, and you'll see that there is currently a shortfall of the project. So the estimated project build is 2.8 million, with insurance proceeds at calculated 2.1 million. This shortfall has come about from the value at the time of the incident and the insurance proceeds based on that valuation. We've worked really closely with the Underfall Yard Trust in relation to approaches to fundraising and to support them in their endeavours. And they have recently commissioned a fundraising consultancy to work alongside them and the board to identify how that shortfall can be closed. But the agreement clearly states that it's the responsibility of the Underfall Yard for the shortfall of the funding, but we would work as collaboratively as we can to identify the sources, support crowdfunding and look at other potential grants if that deemed sum was needed. And I would conclude the introduction there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Any questions or comments? Councillor Rippington.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. In terms of this shortfall, is that something that is likely to, is the project going to progress to a certain point, and then if that money has not been raised, it would stop? And what would the implications of that be in terms of the operation of the yard?
Close monitoring of the project, clearly, in relation to understand where the builds are and where the costs are for the projects. It's in our interest to ensure that this project seeks fruition. And so we've been very clear from the outset in relation to working to close that shortfall via fundraising. So yes, we would want to ensure that this project is concluded, and we would take it stage by stage.
Councillor King, do you have your...
Thank you. It's really good to see this coming forward. It was a really devastating event for the city, and I know it affected a lot of businesses and people personally. So, it's quite hopeful, I think, to see this direction coming forward. I just was interested to know what the proposed balance is on the members of the UHT group to the council members on the board.
So we're just bringing up the agreement. So those. So in the collaboration agreement, sorry, just pulled it from. So the chair from the Underfall Yard Trust, the corporate landlord representative for the council, in that case, Tom Hedges to my right was the officer for the BCC. The Harbour Services representation for BCC on the board, Underfall Yard Trust trustee, Underfall Yard director, and project manager to be appointed by the Underfall Yard Trust.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Malik.
So just a couple of questions. Obviously, the first being that it obviously was devastating events of put us in this position. Insurance payout seems to be adequate. In terms of the engagement with the local community there and making sure that we encourage things like apprenticeships and the get general resident conversations and aspirations with local communities, but also making sure that that's built into the contract. I mean, is there anything in terms of those type of commitments?
Yeah, so that's ultimately something for the Underfall Yard Trust to lead on, but our role in this is to support them through any of those areas. But they are actually undergoing a sort of a more strategic review on how they can build back better. So they're looking at actually how can they sort of take their proposition to another level and use this opportunity as turn the negative into a positive. So as part of that, they are looking at all of those things at the moment, but that ultimately is led by the UYT.
So there's no commitment in terms of the collaboration agreement with us and them that kind of makes them obliged to do that?
No, the agreement's purely about helping them to build back to where they were, back to the status quo before the incident happened.
I think the other comment I'll just add to this is that it's not just about the buildings and the structures. At least one individual lost all their equipment, which was largely irreplaceable, and that's essentially ruined their livelihood going forward. And I think what we're keen first and foremost to get the Underfall Yard back up on its feet again. We are supporting them in other ways as well, and I think there'll be announcements shortly, hopefully, about one of the ways in which we've been trying to support them, including how we attract footfall so that there can be additional contributions going forward. Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, it's good to see a solid plan coming out for this asset. It would be good to fix it and bring it back to life. I was just wondering, the shortfall, it says in the report that they've commissioned a fundraising consultancy. Have they actually raised any money at the moment, or is there just a plan to do so?
Yes, they have commissioned a fundraising consultancy, so they're well onto that. They have raised, I believe, sort of a five-figure sum to date. They're also looking to support the fundraising through their own drawdown of reserves. I don't know the exact figure of that at the moment, but they are well onto that, and I'm sure in time they would be keen to report back a status of that.
Any more questions or comments? Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Thank you. I just wanted to state my support for this. It's a really important site for historical and heritage for the harbour as a whole, and I think the rejuvenation of it will work quite well as well with the wider work going on with the Harbour Committee and the harbour side generally. So yeah, it's very valuable. Good to see. Thank you.
Okay, I can't see anybody else indicating. Pete, was there anything you wanted to add for the end? In that case, to the vote on this. So For the clarity of the committee and the benefit of any members of the public present, I move the motion that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, approves the collaboration agreement that was in Appendix A of your pack. 2, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to transfer all insurance proceeds received in relation to the fire to Underfall Yard Trust as set out in the collaboration agreement. And 3, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to enter into the collaboration agreement. Can I ask for a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. Can I ask all those in favour to show their hands? Thank you. Actually unanimous. I forgot my hand as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Pete and Tom. We now move on to agenda item number 8. Agenda item number 8 is Building Practice Health and Safety Capital Plan. This report seeks approval of the 2025-2026 Building Practice Health and Safety Capital Budget allocation. This is a key decision as it involves a spend of over £500,000. I would like to invite Pete Anderson again as Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure, and Tom Edges again as Interim Head of Corporate Landlord, to introduce and outline the report.
Thanks, Chair. So this report, we've been bringing this report to Cabinet previously and now for committee in terms of to give visibility in relation to our high priority activity in relation to building practice, health and safety and repairs and maintenance on our estate. We have a large operation estate and therefore we do need to ensure that we are prioritising those works in relation to enable us to have a compliant asset base. And so you will see in the supporting appendix there is detail in relation to where the allocation of the £2.4 million for next year is being allocated to, and you'll see there are several schools within that list which demonstrates our ownership of our 34 local primary schools in relation to the work that we do in relation to condition surveys and the prioritisation that we need to do. We are in the process via property transformation to stand up a new corporate landlord service. So the coordination of this activity will be an integral part of how we monitor delivery of programmes, projects and spend in relation to health and safety compliance on our repairs and maintenance schedule for the year ahead. We will evolve this work closely with our services moving forward to ensure that we've got effective strategic asset management plans. And the report references estate rationalisation. Rationalisation is an important strand of work at the moment that we're working through and ensuring that we target the buildings that are required, but also they're in a condition that enables us to continue to operate effectively and not necessarily invest monies into buildings that may be in a rationalisation programme of works, but confident that this programme of work, this schedule of works will be the right investment in the right place in the right asset. We also, as part of our structures around corporate health and safety, operate a bi-monthly building safety group. Has been operating for several meetings now, and within that group we'll be monitoring all spends of R&M, repairs and maintenance on our buildings, point of escalation and potentially the reprofiling of funds if if a project is no longer required and we can reallocate the funds to a pressing need across our estate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Malik.
Yeah, so it doesn't specify the specifics of each kind of project and what it's costing, but the one thing that's really kind of concerning to me is that the limited lifespan of fluorescent fitting committee and event spaces in City Hall still hasn't been replaced for LED. Is that correct? That we're still running on fluorescence in the City Hall?
In terms of lighting, sorry, I didn't quite...
In terms of lighting, I mean, it doesn't say how much money it's going to cost. It gives us the justification for works. And obviously there's a set figure at the end for most of the works. It would have been helpful to have a breakdown of each project. But yeah, that's just one thing that just kind of sticks out for me.
We can provide that information. We tried to keep the information high level, and obviously behind all of this activity, all the lists is the detail of the whys and the wherefores, as well as obviously the financial breakdown. So we provided the headline summaries. Clearly, decarbonisation improvements to energy efficiency are an important part of our work with our corporate landlord as well through City Leap. The activity would be, in the case of inefficient lighting, would be temporary whilst there are plans in relation to ensure that we can improve the energy efficiency of our core assets.
And in terms of other grants and things that come from central government for these buildings, have we taken opportunities for that type of income?
So the 2.5 is made up of nearly £1 million of DFE grant, particularly from education. We're actively working closely with our City Leap partners and WECA to identify funds that are available for energy efficiency and decarbonisation. So the public sector decarbonisation scheme is currently on its 4th round, and we've put our latest bid in, and we're working through a proposal for what they call PSCS, Public Sector Decarb Fund, for version number 5. Working closely with WECA as well in relation to opportunities around grants. So rest assured, if there is an opportunity, we do go after that, and I think we have been successful, and I know our sustainability team, I think, have got a 100% success rate for grants. So yes, continue to work in partnership.
Yeah, and Chair, I would just say that as a council, as a city hall, as a destination where we all sit and make these decisions, it's really important that we are energy efficient in this building. And if there is fluorescent lights still compared to LEDs, we need them changed.
I agree. We also have a listed building, and some of the listed buildings at the moment are proving difficult to bring up to the same standards as more later buildings. I think also the other reason for having a wider figure for the rather than putting a price against each and every one is that inevitably some of those will cost a little bit more and some will cost a little bit less. No, ideally we want them all to cost a little bit less, but it never seems to work out that way, and it allows the team to move some funds from one to the other to make sure they're delivered. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Goots?
Yeah, so this report is the same story, sadly, as the reports on maintenance backlogs and for homes and housing, that a lot of our council buildings have been allowed to deteriorate, quite sadly, under previous administrations. And some of the things in the report are quite worrying, like A-bond deteriorating and hazardous, and Ashley Court Mansion at risk, museums with windows structurally unsound, H&S risk to the public, the Exchange and Wellington Depot, Airballoon Primary leaking roofs, and Sefton Park Primary leaking roof causing disruption. It doesn't reflect well on our attitudes and priorities as a city, really, that things have been allowed to deteriorate to this state. Is there going to be, obviously this is all remediation work, what can we do going forward to ensure that we don't get into this situation again of having such poor quality buildings?
Being a corporate landlord does bring lots of challenges. I think as the committee know, we do own a very large estate. So in the context of ensuring that we've got the right estate that meets the needs for 2025 and moving forward is really important. I think as any corporate landlord, ensuring that a building is watertight, the stresses and strains, whether that be flooring, windows, ceilings, etc., electrics, it is a real challenge. The life cycle modelling now of a building is really important, understanding how much does it cost us now, how much will it cost us in 10 years. Clearly the inflation and material costs are always unknowns, and we've seen inflation at nearly 13% in recent years has been a real challenge for us. But the introduction of the corporate landlord will go huge strides in making us more efficient as a landlord and ensuring that we are focusing the right time and effort, but also that future modelling in relation to where we need to put the assets and where we don't. I mentioned on the previous item, our estate is vast and therefore we do need to reduce, but also make sure we've got the our core buildings and our locality solutions are buildings where people can feel safe and also we can have a consistent level of quality. The quality in City Hall and Temple Street, as we know, that for the last refit in 2016 was significant, and we don't have that level of quality across our locality estate, which is really important for us to introduce that as part of corporate landlord and ensure the delivery of model of our locality solution, mainly through neighbourhood services, adults and children, are in line with their target operating model. So property colleagues, we've got property partners, as we call them, roles in the council that align to each service. So ensuring that we understand what their asset needs are for the year ahead and the longer term are important. And that's something that we're working through as the corporate landlord model moving forward.
Okay, thank you. There's just one more thing. What's a trauma-informed improvement? The trauma part is what's worrying me.
It's a term which is used particularly within children, in relation to ensuring that the environment that children are being seen with their care with their parent or individually, depending on their age, is important that the environment is safe, visually, as well as doesn't trigger the young person, particularly if there is in relation to a neurodivergence or a trauma incident that they've inherited because of where the room is or the light, etc., etc. So it's ensuring that the physical space can be the best type of intervention for the best individual at the best time.
Thank you.
I think it's also fair to say that, and the same applies to our housing stock, is that a lot of the properties, the infrastructure we look after is old, is getting old, and inevitably, and I say that as somebody who's now past 60, old things start to decay more quickly. I certainly feel that happening to me at the moment. Councillor Kim.
Thanks. I've got a proposed solution to one of Councillor Gooch's questions on how we don't waste this money in the future. Perhaps not by replacing the windows in buildings that we're then going to board up and mothball in the coming months, as is the proposal in some of the budget proposals at the moment. And just on that, so yeah, Blaze is on here, Red Lodge, Georgian House, Clifton Library, all of these have got question marks over them. I'm just interested to know, because we're being asked to approve this programme, is there a secondary list? Is this budget adequate to cover everything that's in here? And if some of these things don't end up being relevant to do the work on, if they do get closed, then is there a secondary list on where that money would go instead?
There is a list, and yes, there is a very long list. In the context of the properties or the assets that are described in the list, they are based on priority. So in relation to the here and now and requiring to ensure that they are safe and compliant, we do need to do various levels of work depending on the level of footfall, as well as how often it is open. But we do need this level of activity for this funding envelope on these assets because they are the highest priority for compliance. I think if I'm in the context of some of these properties, we won't be investing huge amounts to future-proof but it's more around the here and now and the health and safety priorities. But yes, there is another list. In terms of, is this sufficient for this list? We believe it is based on the assessment and the costs that we've done.
Councillor Stafford Townsend.
Thanks. I just wanted to sort of explicitly address the part about the windows for the historic houses. Even if they are mothballed temporarily, they will still be staying within our ownership, and we do have a really important duty of care to them to protect them as our heritage assets. So that's why we need to replace our windows and do the sort of related health and safety things to them to keep them safe for the future of Bristol.
Any more questions or comments? Councillor Blenkinsop.
More of a comment and then a short question for my own curiosity. So I'm very glad to hear about Nova Primary School getting the roof covering. That is going to be extremely helpful. I'm very grateful. Yes, it is. But I know they've had a lot of problems, so I'm very glad to see that. But I was curious, because you mentioned the priorities and that came to the education project. Obviously, I understand there's a lot to be done. So I was curious what the criteria for the priorities were when it came to education. Are we doing this based on number of pupils, need, age of the building? I just wanted to know a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, ultimately, it's done on prioritisation around keeping the schools open and operating and safe. That's the starting point for us, is about safety. And we work our way down from there. But obviously, the compliance is key. The challenge is the resource and the budget, and we can't do everything. We can't do everything for everybody. But yeah, we work with our property partner who works closely with the education team to go through and work out which schools require which support. And obviously we have surveyors carrying out their surveying. One thing we look to do going forward, and it goes back to the future proofing and the long-term approach, is condition surveys. So we'd be very keen to see if we can improve our understanding of the properties. I think that's a big piece of the corporate landlord model, is to better understand life cycle and long-term needs for the assets. And then of course the challenge going forward with the schools will be understanding if and when some of them may move to academies and trusts in time as well. So it's understanding working that through as well.
Thanks for clarifying.
Any more comments or questions? Nope. Okay. So agenda item number 8, building practice and health and safety plan. So for the clarity of the committee and for any members of the public watching, this is a vote. So I move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources 1 approves the 25-26 building practice health and safety capital budget allocation as set out in the report and in Appendix A. 2 authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee to take all steps required to implement the programme of works in Appendix A, including procuring and awarding contracts which may be over the key decision threshold. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Can I ask for all those in favour to show their hands? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9, which is the in-house fleet vehicle replacement programme, purchase of electric vehicle tippers. This report seeks approval to use the outstanding £633,000 from the vehicle replacement programme as approved at Cabinet all the way back in December 2017 to purchase 9 4.25 electric vehicle tipper vehicles to replace existing old and non-compliant vehicles. This is a key decision as it involves spend over £500,000, and I would like to invite Pete Anderson, Director of Property Assets and Infrastructure, and Tom Hedges, Interim Head of Corporate Landlord, to introduce and outline the report. Over to you, Pete.
Thanks, Chair. Pleased to say this is a positive report in relation to our ongoing vehicle replacement programme that has been in existence for many, many, many years, as the Chair has just indicated, in terms of the funds of over £6 million that were approved in 2017. The report identifies the particular service that we are looking to seek an EV purchase of 9 vehicles, which is grounds, parks and estates. They have a current fleet of over 50, and yes, it's our aspiration to ensure that we have compliant vehicles, both from an MOT perspective, of course, but also via CAS compliance, and ultimately to seek a EV solution if they are available. You'll note from the report that there was an initial procurement exercise in the summer of 23 to identify an EV solution for our tippers. That are quite bespoke in relation to payload and cage arrangements, etc. And unfortunately at that time, the major manufacturers weren't able to provide a vehicle that met our specification. But pleased to say that's now been, as the maturity and expertise in the EV sector has improved, there are now there is a vehicle that we're able to identify and purchase. And based on the value of funds available in the vehicle replacement programme, we're able to identify and recommend that we purchase 9 of these vehicles. The evidence base of the report demonstrates how much each vehicle would cost, as well as utilising government grant and potentially identifying savings. Sorry, not potentially, savings are identified also with the selling of these vehicles that we own, as well as the fuel savings and potential any liability as well. So there is a saving of for revenue of over 30,000 in relation to the purchase of these 9 vehicles. It will increase the number of our EV fleet. So we currently have over 400 vehicles that we operate through 3 fleet services. It's a 50-50 split across the revenue account services and HRA, and this 9 would then take us to nearly 60% of our fleet, which on our revenue fleet, which is EV. So we're continuing to move in the direction of having not only CAS compliant but also EV vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. And when it says 9 4.25, it's at the weight of the vehicles, it's 4.25 tonnes. So they're heavier than the ones we had previously, which were 3.5 tonnes. Yeah. Right. I know it's a pedantic point, I was just double checking. Any comments, John?
Thanks very much, Chair. It is a positive report, as you say, and it's the way the world is moving and should move. Just a couple of points. I'm just curious on 2 things. One, the range of these vehicles, whether they match the range of the current vehicles or not. So will they do the job? I'm sure they will, but I'm just curious. And the second one, do we have enough chargers in stock or in place to actually charge these additional vehicles? Because I don't know whether they need more charge than perhaps cars or smaller vehicles.
In relation to the range, I can't give you a definitive answer, only from the recommendations from the staff that believe, and Parks have approved that they do meet their specifications. So one assumes that they do. In relation to charging, yes, we have increased the level of charges at Sandy Park significantly, and with the plans to install chargers at some of our fleets, at the depot, which I think it alludes to in here. And we've got bids and funds coming via WECA from the Green Recovery Fund to increase our charging network as well. So in the context of Sandy Park being that main depot, for us in terms of EV, we have got the capacity at Sandy Park. Yeah.
Thanks, Pete.
Caroline.
Yes, just wondering, yes, good initiative, good investor save, and key for our decarbonisation. A couple of questions which were the fuel savings, is that net? Because there's no, we don't have the cost of charging on there. Obviously, electricity is quite expensive, so I was just wondering how that compares. And what will be done with the remaining 48k in the budget, because it says obviously it was meant to be spent by 2022 to 23.
The fuel savings would be the comparison of, so I'm assuming it is the net. So I missed your second half of the sentence.
Oh, the second bit, the 48k that's left over. Total cost 585k, leaving 48k from the initial 633, and it was supposed to have been spent by 22-23 apparently.
So that will be, yes, a residue amount within the capital to be potentially reallocated. Yes, in terms of we've timed out from the purpose of the report point, but so it's not necessarily lost, it's potentially money that is there. We are currently working closely with the transport team and the Department of Transport in relation to funds that could be available to us to increase our funds for replacement of vehicles. So there's opportunities for grant for us to use to continue with our vehicle replacement. But the 48k, yes, would be a residue amount.
Tim.
Yeah, Thank you. Yeah, Pete, obviously, you know, good savings and improvements from these vehicles, everything from the fuel savings to the environmental impact. You say if we had a bit more money, we might be able to purchase a 10th vehicle, but I'm wondering actually how many vehicles we have that we need replacing across our fleet, you know, in total, because it seems to me there are more investor save opportunities here maybe, given that this is money that was allocated back in 2017. Have we looked again at what else we could do in this area?
Yeah, constantly looking with fleet services in relation to, naturally there's an ageing fleet, so in identifying which vehicles do we need in which sector. We work closely with our HRA colleagues as well in relation to their old fleet, which some aren't CAS compliant, to ensure that we can work with their vehicle replacement fund to prioritise the vehicles, particularly in the HRA, which are older than the general revenue funded fleet. So yes, constantly looking at our fleet replacement process.
Yeah. No further plans at the moment? No other money allocated to do this, or is this the extent of what we're doing at the moment?
So those plans with our working closely with our strategic transport colleagues and government to look at potential grant schemes. So we do have plans, but at the moment we don't have any more money built into the capital programme for vehicle replacement. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And just one last thing on you mentioned there's a government grant element in here. Presumably that was factored in at the time of the budget, was it, in 2017? So has that government grant remained at £5,000 across the past 8 years, or has it actually gone up?
I'd have to check. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Are you worried it might have been hit by inflation, or?
Wondering whether if it was £5,000 in 2017, then it's certainly worth less than £5,000 in real terms now, and whether the government had taken that into account, or like many other things, just let it drift.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I guess the question for me is a more general one about finding electric vehicles, because some of the vehicles we use are quite specialist, not just our own, but also in some other areas of the council's wider business. Thinking, for instance, of the bathing technology here at Bristol Waste Use. Are we finding that increasingly there are electric vehicle versions, or at least more eco-friendly versions of all those type of industrial vehicles coming through now?
Definitely there is more variety of EV solution for us, and I think we can demonstrate via the vans and the minivans over particularly the last 3 years, where we've worked closely with Bristol Waste Company on their delivery of their soft FM services, where we've been able to replace vehicles that aren't standard cars but small vans and large vans. So we were part of a national pilot with Highways England, or National Highways, to enable us to test electric fleet and then to retain them after the trial period. So that was a really good example where we were able to increase our EV vehicles. I think this is a very good example of the technical vehicles that are coming on stream, particularly in the tipper space. So most of our vehicles are cars as well as small vans, with then larger vans, but the specialists particularly are in the ground space. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'll ask the committee to vote. So I move the motion that the Committee for Strategy and Resources authorises the Executive Director, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to purchase 9 4.25-tonne EV tippers in line with the procurement route and maximum budget envelope outlined in this report. Can I ask for a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Caroline. Can all those in favour please raise your hands? That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to agenda item number 10. This is also about vehicles. So agenda item 10 is about the vehicle hire contract. This report seeks approval for the procurement and award of a new contract for vehicle hire. Again, this is a key decision as it involves spend over 500,000. And once again, I would like to invite Pete and Tom to introduce and outline the report. Pete, over to you.
Thank you. So the previous report focused on purchasing vehicles to enable us to flex and to be able to respond to a variety of service needs. We do have a hire contract that we can draw upon, and it's for a framework, and the framework, the Performance Partnership Limited framework. There's been an increase in demand in relation to hire vehicles, and the report outlines particularly two key service areas. Vehicle requirements for homeschool transport, as well as vehicle requirements for staff working through our housing division, particularly in relation to the need in relation to servicing, compliance, etc., which has resulted in working closely with Fleet Services, who operate these contracts as well as the maintenance of the vehicles, and to enable us to add a contract that was coming to an end, but we also need to increase the ceiling or the budget value of the contract based on the aforementioned two services. So the report outlines we want to go into follow a new framework, 2-year contract from the 1st of February. We are confident there is the framework to enable us to call off. So it's a tender process as a framework which we can call off and get these decision ahead of the 1st of February for us to continue with our hire arrangements that will provide the necessary vehicles. So the budget does not sit in Fleet Services, it's budgets that have been made available for this extra hiring a vehicle need from our housing division and homeschool transport. So the report is asking for us a decision for us to enter in terms of a new hire contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Do I have any? Councillor Blenkinsop.
Thanks for this. I was reading this and was a little bit struck by, I had a couple of questions here because I'm a little bit confused. So we've got 111 long-term hire vehicles, 66 for the HRA, and the HRA wants an additional 60 hire vehicles. Now I'm reading that as 60 to 126 vehicles. Am I reading that correctly, or is some of the 60 being used to replace, for example, non-compliant vehicles?
If you read it, that it's an additional 60 to their that they currently have.
That seems like quite a substantial increase. Is that some explanation as to why they need quite that additional scale would be welcome?
The need is based on their operational needs, so we're responding to the needs in relation to officers who require a vehicle, who are attending the maintenance requirements of our 28,000 housing stock, and so therefore it's based on their request for need. It does appear high, but I think it demonstrates the level of operational need in relation to what's required for an individual, and then the necessary tools to do the job, hence having the vehicle. They are developing, as the paper says, they are developing their own options appraisal to renew other parts of their fleet. They do have a vehicle replacement programme, and we'll work alongside them in relation to identifying vehicles from a purchase perspective rather than the need to flex in relation to hire vehicles.
I find that quite curious because we've had sort of 28,000 for quite some time. We haven't mysteriously acquired another doubled our housing stock, so I find it odd that we need another new 60 vehicles. I also found it a little bit worrying because in the finance advice, again, if I'm reading this correctly, is that finance colleagues supporting the HRA have indicated they can only afford the current level of spend. So it reads as though we are giving them 60 new vehicles that they cannot maintain and cannot afford. I'm hoping that I've read that incorrectly, but that's how it's coming across. So a bit more clarity on the finance element would also be very welcome.
I think the key is about flex. It's giving HRA what they need when they need it. And in relation, if we have a contract that doesn't have a ceiling and the requirement comes visible to us or a request, and we don't have the contract with a relevant ceiling, so it's not a contract linked to money that we're expending from the outset. It's having a ceiling which we believe would be needed to be met from housing and from homeschool transport. So this does give us that flexibility. Clearly, in terms of housing, in terms of how they budget, how they operate, where they generate funds through, or maybe how they reallocate funds to the need in relation to their building compliance is for a question for housing. But we believe that we are able to respond to their needs by giving them a contract ceiling that potentially up to the extra 60 vehicles.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious I've been speaking quite a lot, so I'll just leave it that I still have some concerns, but I'll leave it there.
No, I think they're good questions, Tom, and it's well asked. I guess one of the things we're doing is instructing resources. We set the spending envelope, and it's then up to the various policy committees to work within that envelope, within whatever else they need to do within that particular area. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, we've just seen from the previous paper, obviously, the benefits of purchasing modern vehicles. And I'm wondering, it says in here that with reference to the HRA vehicles, this is a temporary position whilst the HRA develop their own options appraisal to renew their fleet. Is this contract flexible enough? Will the hiring be flexible enough that if they were to advance their appraisal and come forward with a requirement to purchase rather than lease at an earlier date, which would then start saving money in the longer term, would we be able to hand back the leased vehicles or buy them?
Yes, it will give us that flexibility with the expectation that we don't want to hire. This gives us the flex temporarily. These vehicles would be CAS compliant, but they wouldn't necessarily be EV. There's clearly a cost implication for hiring EV rather than CAS, but CAS compliant. But yes, we do need to have that flexibility to enable HRA to purchase the vehicles if there's available funds to do so, or the need is no longer required based on the building compliance.
And just a very quick pedantic point on the paper. On page 89, it says spend is currently estimated at 557k for the HRA, and then in the very next line it says estimated at 0.886 million. And I'm just wondering, could we not have figures that match up so they're comparable? So that would be 886k, wouldn't it? Yeah, it's just easier to understand when you've got comparable figures in these papers. Thanks.
Yeah, noted, thanks. And I'll go back to our finance colleagues.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Malik?
Thank you, Chair. Just in reference to the home to school transport, so would this be a new scheme, or is it upgrading an existing scheme? So it looks as if they were moving away from the taxis and going to an in-house fleet. Is that correct?
My understanding is it is a new scheme. The detail of that I would have to defer to our children's colleagues. But the change of model that they are considering, they do need more vehicles to meet need and potentially save money in the delivery of the service.
Because that was going to be my point. They're going to need a lot more vehicles than the ones that are specified here, and probably they need ownership of those vehicles in the long run. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Councillor Goots.
Just a quick thought that occurred to me for the home to school transport. If you bought those vehicles, they'd be idle for a lot of the day. Is there not a way that we can maybe work around a kind of sharing scheme or something? And also, you mentioned tipper trucks on here. Can they not? Surely they don't need the tipper truck that often for HRA, or is it just a comparison?
Yeah, there are some. The HRA fleet does have tipper or specialist vehicles. In relation to homeschool transport, they're not purchasing there. This is just a higher equipment. Yeah.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, for the benefit of the committee and any members of the public present, I move the motion that the Committee for Strategy and Resources authorises the Executive Director, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to procure and award the vehicle hire contract in line with procurement regulations and within the budget. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Caroline. Can all those in favour please show your hands? And that's passed unanimous. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 11, the upgrade of Analogue assets to digital solutions. And for those of you considerably younger than me, if you want to know what an Analogue is, talk to me after. So this report seeks of approval of £1.05 million of capital funding to upgrade critical analogue assets to digital solutions that are being switched off by the industry. This is a key decision as it involves spend over £500,000. And once again, I'm going to ask Pete Anderson and Tom Edges to introduce and outline the report.
It's the breadth of corporate landlord and property and assets and infrastructure. Once again, it's a very rewarding project, this in relation to upgrading our asset infrastructure in relation to, as the Chair says, from moving from analogue to digital. Having a large estate, having a state-of-the-art operation centre provides us with assets that are ageing, but also potentially also delivering critical services, which is providing support to some of our most vulnerable in the context of pulley alarms, panic alarms, fire alarms, intruder alarms, etc. So the report highlights the two areas that are in view for this capital expenditure in relation to those services linked to the operation centre, but also in relation to our building estate. So we identified there are, we believe, circa 500 alarms that require review, of which we believe about 150 of those alarms are no longer required, or those lines, going into these buildings are no longer required. So we've established this project with some pump prime money for some feasibility funds to set up the programme to then have a coordinated approach between now and the end of this calendar year, when our telecommunication partners, Talk First, Virgin, etc., have notified us of their termination of those lines. It's really important for us to do the due diligence of where those lines are, where they're entering the building, but also what they're connected to. So we estimate that there potentially is circa £90,000 of savings from those 150 that we've already identified that were no longer required. However, there is a digital solution required, and the device at the end of the line to enable the line to function is circa £3,000 per SIM card, to enable us to ensure that the alarm or the purpose of that line is actually fulfilled, and we're able to keep people safe and keep our buildings monitored. So we have an active piece of work happening at the moment with colleagues across our IT colleagues, as well as corporate landlord and the operations centre. And the report provides you with the scope of the work, as well as potential costs that are needed to conclude this work in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Any questions or comments? Tom?
Thank you. I was just looking at this page 105.17, which is that quoting again, these figures are uncertain. The exact unit cost will not be known until each line has been investigated and the correct solution identified. The final cost potentially being below or above this number. 1.05 million seems pretty good, so I'm a little bit worried that the final cost will end up being considerably above it. So I just wanted to get a little bit more clarity on how close we think we are to the correct number on that, if there's going to be a wiggle room of, say, 10%, or if it could be substantially greater.
Thank you. It is still very early, and there is a project board, which I do chair on a monthly basis, where we're tracking the level of discovery in relation to tracking spend. The report reference is Hampshire. They concluded their upgrade recently, and their expenditure was about £750,000 with comparable numbers. No, we don't have a definitive number, and coming back to the point we discussed previously about having an ageing estate, there are some lines that we're not sure what's at the other end of that line or where they go into the building. So, the importance of having a fully functional corporate land was really, really important. But rest assured, we will monitor activity, discovery, and best endeavours with what we believe to be a realistic budget envelope. We will keep monitoring it and escalate to the relevant group within the council if and when required.
Okay, so to be absolutely clear, we are not certain that 1 million is, it could be a quite considerable variance, is what I think you're saying.
I don't think it would be quite a considerable variance. Having the operation centre does provide us with a good understanding of services that are delivering to the individual. So we do support vulnerable people, and we believe that they are getting the service that they need. So we've got that confidence in relation to that end-to-end, but it's in terms of lines that may be either redundant or not active. They might be linked to a building that may be not in operation, but the alarm is still active. But reassure you, in relation to providing services to those most vulnerable, we have a very good and confident understanding that the people that we are supporting and the lines that are entering into their homes, so we can do what we need to do to ensure that we transfer successfully.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'll go to Tim in a moment, is that the very fact that these are analogue lines means that many of them are very old and in some cases may not be properly or correctly recorded. Okay, so we do need to carefully monitor the spend and either make sure it's enough, or if it's not enough, bring it back to strategy and resources.
Definitely, and ensuring that this feeds into having that asset base, not just bricks and windows and glass, but also in terms of other corporate landlord activity to ensure that we've got an accurate database of our assets moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Pete, obviously some quite important services still being provided by these analogue lines, so it's important that we don't lose them before we've been able to switch them over. I'm a bit worried by the line in section 7 of the report that says Virgin Media have indications are that their lines will continue to function until December 2025. I know it's very difficult to get hold of Virgin Media, but have we sought clarification from them on that to find out for sure when they're going to switch these lines off and make sure they don't switch them off before we've been able to carry out the work?
We work closely with Virgin. We continue to ensure that they don't, but it's important to have that in as a definitive response. Working closely with our IT colleagues, and they are confident that we are able to work with them through 2025. So I will take that back for ICT and ensure that we keep ensuring that they are able to. Yeah.
And just to add, for the benefit of any Virgin Media executives watching this, Councillor Tim Ripperton was expressing a personal opinion and not. Do I have any more comments? Councillor Goots?
It seems quite late considering we're already in 2025. There's actually quite a lot of work to be done. How long have we known about this, and are we in danger of not getting it done in time?
I think there's been a challenge in relation to knowing when there was going to be the turn off, and so that has only that is relatively recent. I think we haven't had a good oversight and management on our assets, all of our assets, and priority is focused elsewhere. With the knowledge that we do need to move to a digital solution, but haven't necessarily either given it the prioritisation it requires because the end cut-off date hadn't been notified. I'd like to think since that has matured, and our relationship with Virgin and other providers, which is day to day, we've identified the work through the feasibility work. So this is not new as of today. This is work that we've been doing for probably 6 months. The digital transformation programme for the council has been in operation for several years, although being focused on other parts of the council. But rest assured, that expertise, that knowledge, the understanding of the transformation programme into our buildings is part of which will aid the work that we do. So I do have confidence that those 500 lines won't be exceeded in great numbers, and we'll continue to do the work on a day-to-day basis to hit the target of December 25.
Ellie.
Thank you. Just for clarity, the report that went to the Economy and Skills Committee in September to upgrade the Bristol Operations Centre, was that already funded, and is this additional spend, or is this the agreement for that work too?
My understanding it's different. I think the Operations Centre is very complicated in terms of platforms that they work to, not necessarily the lines, as well as CCTV, actual cameras, actually the camera itself rather than the cabling or the line. We also operate BNet, which is our the IC platform in relation to the cable under the ground, and I know that does need upgrading and maintenance as well. So I can't comment on the finer detail of the report that did come into September, but it is definitely separate to this particular request.
Okay. So the work to upgrade BOC wasn't for 24-25. That's not been completed?
Sorry, can you just...
That wasn't completed. In the paper that came to...
Yeah, I'm not. It's a separate project that I think is owned by ICT and the Op Centre, whereas this is sitting as a programme in corporate landlord.
Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, it may be useful just for clarity, just to send us an email just confirming that they are two separate items. Abdul.
Yeah, just, I don't know, maybe a bit of an obvious one, but so there's going to be a transition from an old system to a new system, and there seems to be some vulnerable people that we're going to be maybe disrupting for a while. Has that been taken into consideration? And obviously, can you assure us that that transition will be the best possible for those people, especially the vulnerable people? But also, some people just don't like new technology, and some of this stuff, the internet is a lot faster. There's a lot of other things that are going to change for them, probably with the telephone system or with the analog handset, whatever, being replaced. So how do we mitigate that? The Equalities Impact Assessment doesn't include anything for the people at the end of it. Actually, it's quite empty, the Equalities Impact Assessment, in terms of the impact on people and residents that of those 500 odd handsets.
Yes, so we are prioritising the people rather than buildings in the context of the programme. The Operations Centre, in relation to delivering services directly, is in contact daily with the activation of the alarms, and there is a communication through when that activation is made, as well as communication with our tenants who are in receipt of these services. In light of prioritising them and ensuring that we do put the SIM card at the end of the line, is something that I believe is something that is manageable on the number of lines, the 500 lines, when some of those are also linked to lifts and actually building access. So we are, the Operations Centre does deliver services for residents outside or people outside of Bristol. So installation of new alarms, it's standard technology with SIM cards. So it's not a difficult exercise to do in that space. So in the context of confident, the expertise that we have with the Operations Centre and the ICT will enable us to prioritise and transfer those people who are vulnerable ahead of switch off.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'll move to the vote on this. For the clarity of the committee and for the benefit of any members of the public present, I'd like to move the motion that the Committee for Strategy and Resources 1 approves the allocation of £1.05 million capital funding to deliver the upgrade from Analogue to digital solutions as outlined in this report under due process. 2, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to spend the allocated capital funds to implement the digital upgrades up to the budget envelope outlined within the report. Can I ask for a seconder, please?
Seconded.
Thank you, Caroline. All those in favour, can you please raise your hands? That's unanimously passed. Thank you all very much. I'm conscious that we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes almost. Would anybody like a short 5 to 10 minute break? Tim? Oh, sorry. Thought you wanted to. Let's take a quick 10-minute break and come back at 3:20. Thank you.
I haven't even read it.
Okay, thank you everyone, and welcome back. We'll just remind everybody we are being webcast again. So next agenda item is agenda item 12, which is the Q3 2024-2025 Corporate Risk Report. This report provides an update on the current significant strategic risks to achieving the Council's objectives as set in the Corporate Strategy 2022-2027 and summarises progress in managing the risks and actions being taken as at Q3 2024-2025. There are no decisions to be taken on this report, which is for information. And I'd like to introduce Joaquin Adenisi, the Senior Risk and Insurance Officer, to introduce and outline the report.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is the Q3 risk report. It contains 20 risks. Just a bit of a context. I've been coming to the committee in the last few months now, and one of the features you will have noticed is the fact that every quarter we're reporting improvement or deteriorations. But of significance, the fact that the correlations between the number of mitigations implemented, new mitigations introduced, and the completion rate, validating the fact that colleagues are really engaging more with the actions. So for this quarter, we have 3 improving risks, and that really gladdens me every time when we report improving risks. 18 high risks, 1 critical risk, CRR 60, which were still lots of mitigations actions going on. You might have noticed from the appendix that perhaps some actions are due 31st of December. So this report has been produced as at 2nd of December. So that means I expect that some of the actions due 31st of December would have been implemented by now. And I've explained the reason why we have a bit of a gap in the timing. So for Q3, we introduced 38 new mitigation action plans to make sure that we challenge the colleagues. And why do we do that? Sometimes either we feel the level of exposure will require additional action plan or could require a little bit of more support to see what we can do and see the difference we can make as well. 20 actions completed within that quarter. We have 1 emerging risks, and we've been tracking this for over a year now. And I'm almost certain that by Q4 it's going to drop because the level of exposure we thought the council will be carrying will not be as much. And the emerging risks are things that we are suspecting could pose potential threat to the council's reputation or finance, and proactively doing something about it. So we handle this particular one consistently for over a year. If you look at it. Also, 1 risk has been proposed for de-escalation. I think I've explained de-escalation also. It means that not that we're removing the risk from the risk register reporting, but when risk actions have been completed and we've tested the impact on the mitigations, and colleagues were able to attest to the fact that they're happy with the level of mitigation, we de-escalate to EDM level. So it will manage at that level. If it deteriorates again, we escalate it. And so that's the reason why we do escalation and de-escalation. No deteriorating risk in Q3. That's really good because if we're keeping hands on the pulse we're keeping our fingers on the pulse. So when we're testing, we're checking, we're responding. So we've been maintaining status quo, but nothing is deteriorating, which is good for us. And we have 3 improving risks: 43, CR 43, CR 59, and CR 61. Again, because some of those actions were completed. And also, we're still tracking all the interdependencies risk. This has been very helpful for us to get the cross-cutting working across directors, across the council, working with our financial risks, so that we have a clear understanding of dependencies, connectivity between all the risk itself. And finally, I just want to say also in terms of the, if you look at, we track the performance of engagement, which is the DMT RAG assessment, and you requested that I should be producing maybe over a year or 3 quarters or 4 quarters, and I've put on the table this time around, looking at Q4 2023-24 to Q3 2024-25. And you can see the improvement in the quality of engagement, the quality of action, which colleagues have been doing, and you can begin to still reconcile the correlation with the action plans, also the fact that we're mitigating all this risk. That's the report. Coming Q4, just we're hoping that some of the risk that has been high or critical for a long time, colleagues are assuring us that they're implementing the mitigations, they're intensifying their efforts. We'll be checking in the next few weeks to see what those efforts result they're creating in terms of the mitigation and reducing exposure for the council. Q4 also, I'm excited, looking forward to council identifying more opportunities. I've been saying it for over a year now. You know, we focus a lot on threats, what could go wrong. But now I want to start thinking, what are the good things we need to do? What are the innovative initiatives going on? What are the savings opportunities for the council to escalate its brand, to our reputation to be improved, our perception of our work, or reduce losses? So I'm hoping that we've informed colleagues with that kind of initiative. I'm hoping that we might see one or two coming through in the future where we have significant opportunities, something good for the council, though uncertain, but we want to explore, we want to engage, and want to see how we can scale it up. Thank you very much. Any question?
Thank you, Joachim. I mean, quick comment for me is, I mean, sometimes this is one of those things that, it doesn't get into the headlines. But when you are doing performance risk, it's difficult to measure where your risks are if the system is not being engaged with. And I think that's what's really been an improvement in the year. We've gone from having some 70 items that were either amber or red, which meant they weren't fully completed. We're now down to 4. Obviously, we need to carefully manage that and keep it going and not rest on our laurels. And then, as we've spoken about this before, is we have the opportunity to now move forward to the next stage, which is start to look at what the opportunities are going forward. So thank you for the work you've done. I'll just, even before I can start, Tom.
You can't fault my enthusiasm. I mean, we do have some substantial risks, but it is a very positive direction to travel. So thank you for the report. It's very encouraging. I just had a small question around, it's page 161, page 30 of the report, CRR 61, failure to measure requirements for CDM. And I note your point that this was written in December, but I just wanted to check on the additional audit, because that was 11% done when this was written. I just wanted to check that was, it seems like quite a tight deadline to be done by the 31st of March. So I just wanted to check that was on track and that was likely to be pulled through.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's on track. Because what we've done is we're still keeping track in terms of after December, we're checking what the colleagues are doing, and I'm hoping, because we're engaging with the colleagues, that by the time we come for Q4, you'll have seen some progress made on it. And if there are other issues regarding the audit, I'm sure we'll be able to escalate as well. But as far as I'm aware, colleagues are intensifying their efforts on it.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, lots of people see these reports, so I'm never sure whether this is the right forum to ask questions, but I'll ask it and then you can tell me if it's not. But CRR 61,
okay.
It's probably something that, should have paid attention to previously because it's been high for a long time, but it's suddenly come down a lot. And what I'm wondering is this because it was a report that's highlighted things that we ought to be doing in order to mitigate risk, and now we've registered that we're doing those things? Because the wording about may cause serious injury to the workforce, obviously that's very concerning when you read that. But I suspect it's not something that has happened where suddenly the risk to the workforce has actually gone up. It's probably that we've got a new set of standards or something that says if we don't meet those standards. Is that what this one is about?
I think it's driven by a lot of regulations in terms of what we need to do, and colleagues are trying to ensure that we're able to meet those regulations. But equally, we're aware of the fact that there's been incidences, and so they're more cautious in terms of being proactive now. So we're very much aware that we need to keep an eye on this, and lots of attention is on it. So that's why you're seeing a lot of effort being put into this action. And often, sometimes, risk actions could be because something's happening somewhere else, and we're able to look at ourselves. Okay, what else can we do to make sure that we don't expose the council to this kind of incident or exposure?
Yeah, okay. So I think you're kind of confirming what I was saying, that something hadn't suddenly happened that made us a lot more made things a lot more dangerous. It's just we've been made more aware of things we should be doing to mitigate against that. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Annie Stafford-Townsend.
Thank you. I just got some questions about some of the housing-related ones that are on 159 and the progress reports, particularly around fire safety, because I know that's something that our tenants are very concerned about. And so there's one for...
Is that CRR 60?
159. So there's fire safety assurance that third-party landlords are completing in order to meet their obligations, and that's at 30% with a deadline of the end of February. And there's another couple that are sort of particularly fire-related in terms of, strategy, and so I just wanted to check how much we are on track to meeting those deadlines.
So for most of the CRR 60, that's the CRR 60 risks, you find it's our most critical risk at the moment. So all the deadlines we're driving from a performance management point of view. So it's not just the mitigation we're doing, but also linking it back to colleagues' actual performance in ensuring that those things are done. And they're aware of the fact that this is a very risk that's quite visible. So as far as I'm aware, they're on track to all the actions. Some are due this year by February, March. And so by the time we come to Q4, we'll be able to give you more feedback in terms of where we are.
Great, that's great clarification, because I was hoping for anybody to look at these papers and think there was actually a massive issue or a risk. So it's good to clarify that actually this is good and positive.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Abdul.
Yeah, so I just want to ask, I mean, we've got this on page 13 of the report, page 142, CRR 13. Being the chair of finance kind of interests me a little bit, talking about the MTFP. And one of the things that it says in the risk causes is the political failure to facilitate the settling of a lawful budget and the risk. And I can see that the trend is constant. I know the amount of work that we're all putting in to kind of make February and March a better place. When do these arrows reflect that? And the work that we're doing at the moment, I mean, how likely is it that that's going to be an upward trend very soon?
Thank you. For CRS 13, as you'll have noticed, sometimes it goes up and down. It depends on where we are with the budget planning. So again, all the efforts going on with all the interdependency, we're closing the budget period. So by Q4, you'll be able to see where we are with this. If you look at last year, it was high at one point when there was some mitigations came in, it came down. So hopefully by Q4, you should be able to have an update of CRR 13.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Joachim. So, as I mentioned before, this report is for noting, so there's no vote. So can I just take that report as noted? Thank you. We move now, thank you, Joachim. We now move on to agenda item 13, support for Bristol's low-income households. This report provides information on the Council's approach to supporting low-income households as a starting point for discussion as to our approach on this topic in 25-26 and beyond, and to seek approval to set up a tasked and finished group of members to review the Council's approach to supporting low-income households. I would now like to invite Graham Clapp, Head of Revenues and Benefits, to introduce and outline this report.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. Firstly, the Task and Finish group is looking to do one specific thing at the start, and that is to critically analyse the spend that we have in order to support those low-income households we've got in the city. So since December 20, we've had something which started off as the winter grant, then became a COVID grant, and then became a household support fund. We're expecting probably over the next 3-4 weeks to get confirmation of our allocation of that for 25-26. It would appear that that amount will be a smaller amount than we got last year. But what we would like to do is use the TFG to critically analyse what we've done, because what we've tended to do, frankly, since 2020 is just do the same thing every time and see whether we're making the best use of the funds that we've got. What that will also impact upon is the Local Crisis Prevention Fund, which you may be aware was funded last year half by previous Household Support Fund and half by an award from the HRA. And that award looks in jeopardy, so it's a question of where we go with regard to that. We also have the discretionary housing payment, which we know the amount of, that's 740,000, which we've got to go into the pot. So the TFG initially will be looking to do what we can critically with those sums to make the best use. And then the second part of it, which is for later in the year, is to look at our approach to the council tax reduction scheme for 2026, 2027, which, as you will know, we're the only core city that has maintained since 2013 the same scheme. And so it's some work to do with regard to whether that's the correct approach and affordable.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open it up for comments and questions. Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I totally see the point of the first actions that need to be taken by the Task and Finish group, and that they've got a very clear deadline. On the second half, I've sat on a group for the last 2 years running, which has gone through all the details of the council tax reduction scheme and you know, the benefits that it has and how it could be reorganised and cut. And I'm just worried that I'm going to, you know, if I'm on this Task and Finish group again, I'm just going to sit through exactly the same thing for a third year running before coming to the same conclusion. It's a bit like, you know, the old adage of madness being doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So that I appreciate that's not a question, that's a comment, but that's my particular comment on this. Thanks.
Do you want to respond to?
Personal view, I think there's a value in us looking at the scheme again. I mean, it's a significant spend. I'm not a politician. If the decision that's made at the end of it is to continue with the scheme as is, that's what happens. But I think there's a real value in us as part of the whole when we're looking at how we spend money to support low-income households, and we've got various different schemes in various different pots, that one goes into the mix.
Councillor Matt. Sorry, Tim, did you have a response to that?
No, I think if we're saying that we're looking holistically at all the money we've got and how best to spend it, kind of understand that, but it sounds like we will have already made the decision on the first part before we look at the second part, and therefore we're not kind of looking at it all in the round.
We have time pressures on the first one. That's the issue. I mean, with regard to Household Support Fund, we're expecting the announcement of how much in the next 2-3 weeks, and that clock starts ticking April the 1st. Bearing in mind that CTR is not coming into effect or unchanged 26-27. We've got 2 different timelines. So that's why we can make the decisions or start to influence decisions. I mean, we can make a decision with Household Support Fund not to spend all of it up front. You know, we can just make an indicative start because we've got that money across the year. But what we wouldn't want to do is leave all of the allocation of HSF till the second half of the year to feed into this, because if we do that, we'll have lost an awful lot of time and we won't be able to help vulnerable people.
Councillor Mack.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the 2 different funds. I can't look at you and talk very easily. But I guess there's an interesting point that the HSF, we don't know the continuity of that. It gets given for a quarter or 6 months at a time. So actually, I don't think, in my view, they're not necessarily interchangeable between the ongoing commitment to council tax reduction scheme and the constantly one-off, not knowing the certainty of the household support fund. We've spent many hours together on these working groups and looking at consultations and looking at the data. I guess I'm sure we'll get onto my amendment in a minute, but there's a few points I've added in there about how I think this could work. And I think one point that we didn't really have before was external stakeholders. Let's work with the groups that both help people and support people with benefits, but also those in receipt of these funds when we pay them out, to to get that greater information about what is helping people and how it's helping people, rather than just having a small group of councillors. I also, the reason that I'm proposing extending the period of work for this and going back to my last amendment to an S&R report was about the affordability of the council tax reduction scheme being based on and linked to, you know, to an extent, government funding. And the conversation I want to I guess I'm trying to prolong our discussion and our decision and our work around what we're doing with the council tax reduction scheme until after, in the spring, we get an idea of ongoing funding for the council, which isn't me saying that we'll definitely have money to afford it, but it is a please can we not have to make any decisions about it until we know what money we're getting, until we know what we can afford, which was my point about at a later point discussing a steer in terms of the affordability of the scheme with the Chair of Strategy and Resources, and for that to be discussed by this working group. So I guess my amendments are my attempts that the working group gets as much power and control or as much influence over the future of that council tax reduction scheme at as late a point as possible, given what money we're getting nationally, rather than having to commit to anything earlier.
Go ahead.
Just a couple of points of clarification. Household Support Fund last year was awarded in 2 6-month chunks. We're expecting this year's HSF to be an annual 12-month award. Certainly some stuff that I saw today suggests to me that the amount will probably be just under £1 million less than last year for us. So from that perspective, that's also why I think with regard to the TFG, it's absolutely critical that when we look, we've got a smaller cake that we've got to divide between the same number of people. We look to make some decisions on what that is, rather than have a situation whereby I just come to you with a report which says we do all the same as we did last year and we take 11% off of everybody.
Okay, any more questions, comments? Tom?
So I have not experienced the wonders of task and finish groups on the council tax reduction scheme for 2 years. So I apologise if this is a question that everyone else knows and I don't as a new councillor. Fair enough. But I just want to be clear, when we talk about the critical analysis of this, I want to question, are we including sort of indirect consequences? Because my concern around removing the council tax reduction scheme is perhaps knock-on effects of people who are economically productive are then suffering and find it difficult to be as economically productive as that, shunt them into other council services and therefore increase strain on those budgets. I don't know how in-depth our analysis is, and it would be good to know how far we kind of take that analysis forward.
Okay, can I just respond to that first, and I'll hand back to you, because I don't want to put words into the mouth of Councillor Goulandris or the rest of the Conservative group, but I think it's probably fair to say, based on the comments in the Finance Subcommittee, that your group is probably the least attached to the council tax reduction scheme as it is now. But I don't think even that sounds terrible, but I don't think your group is planning to completely delete it. It's about modification. I think one of the things we do have to look at is we also need to look at what our fellow core cities are doing well, how they come to their conclusions as well. I have said in the Sub-Finance Committee, however, that I think we should be at the forefront rather than being in the middle. But I do think we have that responsibility to look at whether what we're doing at the moment is the best thing we could be doing for those people on low-income households. And what I will also say as well is I think there's also an opportunity for us to feed into the comprehensive spending review as well as a result of the deliberations of the task and finish group. And even through the potential news, because it's not confirmed that we may be getting less funding, I do honestly believe that there is some intent to do something as part of the comprehensive spending review. I mean, in an ideal situation, we'll have a reinstatement of council tax benefit paid by national government rather than leaving it to local authorities. And I'll ask for that, but I suspect I'm not going to get it at the moment. Graham.
So a couple of points. Firstly, to answer the question you asked, and I know you weren't in the groups, I think it wouldn't be fair to say anything other than every single possibility, eventuality, set of circumstances was debated. So it certainly wouldn't be a situation where we just have a TFG that says, oh yeah, it's a real shame that we're going to now ask everyone to do this, and absolutely we will consider the impact and the knock-on effects. Just very quickly on the point about the funding, the announcement that was made by the Department for Work and Pensions was that the HSF for 25-26 would include discretionary housing payment awards. So we immediately knew we were £740,000 down. But the stuff which has come out today talks about 421 million for England as part of it. And what that does effectively is it's over the full year, because that's a half year figure, is it's a 100 million cut for England. So if you extrapolate that, that's where I've got the 966k from. It is still to be confirmed, but those figures are in the public domain now. So it's gone from 842 to 742 for England.
Okay, thank you, Graham.
That's right.
Any more comments or questions, Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to come back on what Tom was saying. Just there was some discussion over the last 2 years in the groups about knock-on impacts on other departments, but I do think if we're going to go through this again, we could do with more information on that, because quite often it was sort of raised by councillors rather than officers about, you know, those kinds of issues, and then we were given a bit of information. But I think it really is important that we know that if we take money away in one area, what the impact on adult social care and that kind of thing is in other areas, and have some sort of quantification of that, because I think that's something we haven't had in previous years.
I think that's a fair comment, and I would add, I think what we would probably start with the base of this time is a little bit more clarity on what even we were thinking about doing, because what we did last year, if we're frank, we put so many different options with so many different subsets and so many different proposals that for everybody on the TFG, and certainly a few of us were there, it became incredibly complex to even completely agree what it was we were talking about. So from that perspective, if we start with the clarity of what we would consider the proposals are, whether it's stay as is or make this change, we can then model the impact. Obviously, the impact of no change is fairly self-evident, but the other one.
And I think just to finish off, one of the things that was obvious is that the majority of the money goes to the people who need it the most in that scheme. So you can, if you trim around the edges, you don't actually save a lot of money. So the way to save the most money is to take it away from the people who need it the most, and that's why it's such a difficult conversation. And I do remember even Jeff Gollop, who chaired it last year, you know, came around to the conclusion that actually we shouldn't ditch it in its current form. So it'd be interesting to see what happens this time.
Yeah, and I think it would be interesting to see that, but I think we are still finding that even people who are, I'm going to say, benefiting in quotation marks from the council tax reduction scheme are still finding themselves getting into debt as well. So it may be that that's what we end up with, is that because we can't find another way to make it work better. But I think we owe it to those people to at least try. Tom?
I mean, I will nail my colours to the mast on this one, that I am very keen that we, you know, I have extreme scepticism precisely because of what you've just said. Squeezing blood from a stone is inherently going to be expensive and difficult. The administrative costs, the collection costs, all of it, I think, add up. And ultimately, I don't think it's a very profitable line to go down. But I appreciate that this is something that we do need to discuss and look at the actual data for. I'm just very attached to, well, I know we are all here to help out the most vulnerable, to help out our residents, but it's something I feel quite strongly on. I'll leave it at that.
I'm tempted to make a comment about unusually that me having more confidence in the current government than you have at the moment. But I take your point, it is a good point. Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't been involved in these task and finish groups previously, and it seems to me that it would be good to have a look at it and to have some input from groups like Acorn, again, to make sure that we're actually spreading the money in the most effective way. But speaking with people on other councils, it seems that wherever they're looking at trying to reduce the council tax reduction scheme, yeah, I agree with Tom, like blood out of a stone. You're basically, whatever you're looking at, you're not going to get that money back because people just can't afford to pay it. And then you're spending more money trying to get that, reducing amount that you can actually get out of them. It's probably better to look at how we can help people. And I know that some councils are actually using when people are getting into difficulty with paying the council tax as a way to actually reach them and help them with other aspects of their lives. So there might be something more wraparound help that we can actually put in place during this whole process.
I suppose my only response to that would be other authorities might be finding it more difficult, but they're not authorities that have started from the base that we have, which is 67% of working age people who make an application don't pay anything at all. So we are an outlier in that regard. So I would certainly accept, absolutely, there are people in straitened circumstances, absolutely accept that people have got debt. But we are, and we need to come back to this as a debating point, that we are an authority that has a scheme that costs us £44 million, and we have 22,000 people of working age who don't pay anything. Now, we may politically decide that that's absolutely acceptable, that's completely reasonable, but the point about other authorities is they're not starting from the point that we're starting from.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Councillor Mack.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this discussion debate. I think it becomes, especially you're talking about the knock-on impacts and how hard, to be honest, also how hard it is to know that. What is the cost if we do this here? Do we get that cost directly back somewhere else? Well, then I think there's this bigger question of what is our purpose as an authority? And most of the time we're using money to provide public services. We're not really here. It's more the government role to provide the direct benefits. And I think there is this question of the value of the money here as a benefit versus the value of that money somewhere else as a service. If that service my priority would be for those services to be focused on the same communities who need it, and are we doing that? Obviously my actual preference would be to change our tax system so that others are paying the taxes to fund those public services, which is why I do agree with looking at this, because I think there are some really complicated questions there about, where does the money come from, where does it go, how do we use our money? We don't often give cash out, we decide more to go down the services, and that's how we're helping communities. So yeah, that is why I understand that given our financial situation over the next couple of years, we need to be looking at this, and I would like to be looking at it in depth, and hopefully I'll go on to mention the amendment in a minute now.
Well, first of all, we have to move and second the original motion, and then you get your opportunity to put through the amendment. So is everybody happy for me to move the motion to... So the motion, for the benefit of the committee members of the public present, the motion is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources note the report, and that the Committee for Strategy and Resources use the terms of reference for a task and finish group on supporting low-income households. Can I ask for a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Mack, if you want to move your amendment.
Yeah, so my amendment covers making sure that this working group has the external stakeholders. It is a non-exhaustive list at the moment, because actually I just realised North Bristol Advice Centre is based in my ward of Lockleys, and my viewers should be on this list as well, but including Citizens Advice and organisations such as Heart of BS13 and Acorn, who have obviously been very active on this issue, and also that the working group or task and finish group, that we're very clear from the beginning that it's continuing for an amount of time to cover the questions properly, because I think at some point we assumed that an amount of work could be done there, but actually it originally only mentioned sort of 2 months, and I want to make sure it's going to be continuing long enough to do the necessary work.
Okay, can I ask for a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Malik.
I'd like to second, but I'd like to make some remarks as well, please, if you don't mind, Chair.
Thank you. And now we'll move to the debate on that amendment. So does anybody, Councillor Malik?
Thank you. I did want to make some comments whilst I seconded, but I suppose this is as equal. And it's really just a statement or just to endorse what Councillor Mack puts forward. And I think it's a very thoughtful amendment supporting Bristol's low-income households. And it's just not a matter of, I suppose, policy, but also a moral responsibility as politicians, elected people that are worried about the city and its vibrancy and diversity. And I think by engaging with organisations like ACORN and Bristol Law Centre and other people that have been suggested, I think that it would be really, really welcome and a good opportunity to kind of thrash this out properly, considering the economical inequality and keeping that at the heart of this discussion. And additionally, I commend the focus on timelines to deliver tangible outcomes swiftly, so we know when to expect this to kind of flourish and make sure that it keeps us in tune with that. And this amendment reflects the commitment to equality and urgency, and I think that's really important. And I hope it will help the marginalised communities that we're here to kind of serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, you had your hand up. Sorry if I missed.
I didn't want to steal. Anyway. With regards to the key stakeholders to be engaged with our group, I think we've got some good listing here. It just seems I was a little bit amused by the shortness of the list, really, because I think there are quite a few organisations that we could reach out to, and I don't know whether or not, I mean, with regards to the household support, of the support fund, are there organisations that, you know, are involved with that aren't on this list? Because I feel like they ought to be very much included in it, and I appreciate it's not exhaustive, but it just seemed strange to leave them out.
Yeah, I totally take that on board. This was sort of off the top of the head to give some examples. I think we might have mentioned about 8 might be a good number to invite in to make it a sort of reasonable few meetings. So that would be sort of 4 or 5 more slots. Graham might have some more ideas.
Yeah, there's a couple of points to that. Firstly, absolutely with HSF, it would be without saying that we would need to speak to all of the groups that we've awarded to previously, because clearly with what is potentially a smaller amount, there going to be engagement with them anyway. So, and also important to stress again, very short timeline with regard to that to at least kick that off. CTR, my view is it's a longer timeline, and we would look for groups that had a considerable interest in that area. So it may well be, and it's not my amendment, but it may well be that we have some people who are involved in the HSF side and then they step away because they don't have such an involvement with the CTR side, and there are people who join for the CTR side who possibly don't have so much for the HSF.
Ellie.
Yeah, so Feeding Bristol, Red Cross, Bristol Age UK, Centre for Sustainable Energy, Westall, they're the HSF distribution charities, and they're all missing from this list. I've got no interest in derailing the amendment. I think stakeholder engagement is great and really good, but can I just ask that we either have a good comprehensive list or we just say stakeholders, and then I will leave it to the group to decide who those stakeholders should be. But it just, we've got some key people missing from that list. You know, it's a quite carefully chosen few select people that we put on there. I just, you know, we need to broaden that out to make sure that we are bringing in all the voices that we need to bring in, especially the ones that have like worked with so many smaller organisations across the city to get support services into them in recent years. So, yeah, I think Graham would have a pretty comprehensive idea of who to include in those discussions. But stakeholder engagement is great, obviously. Very much approve that, but can we just make sure it's a comprehensive list? Thanks.
So, can I suggest, Graham, that you compile a list with proposers coming from members of the Strategy and Resources Committee? Obviously, it'd be a separate working group, and it'd be up to that working group to decide which stakeholders they want to engage with. But I'm sure if there's lists that you're happy with, most members of the working group would be more than happy to engage with them.
Absolutely. What I'll do is I'll circulate the list of all the people who have vested interests in previous HSF awards as a starter for 10, and then obviously we've got the CTR stuff.
Any more comments or questions? Caroline and then Tim. Sorry, Tim.
Do we need to amend the amendment in order to vote on it?
It already says other stakeholders with relevant experience at the group's discretion.
I was going to propose that we did just amend it to something a bit more generic, so that we're happy with it. To say key stakeholder groups as recommended by the Task and Finish group in consultation with officers, something along those lines. Heather, you happy with that? Yeah.
So, do we need to vote on that, or can we take that as... I'm looking at you, Ian.
Not yet voted on the amendment, so I don't know if Councillor Mack wishes to put forward a slightly different amendment.
Yeah, I think it's just key stakeholders with relevant experience to be invited at group's discretion, so kind of cutting out the middle bit, I think.
Okay, any more questions or comments? So on that basis, oh, it was seconded by Abdul.
It's been slightly changed.
Oh, right, my apologies. Can I have a seconder for that amendment?
Second, reserve my remarks.
As I'm going to let Tom second it this time.
Sorry, Chair, just for clarity, can we have that bit of the read back in so that we know exactly what we're all voting on?
Key stakeholders, as will be determined by the Task and Finish group.
Okay, so the amendment has been moved, amended and seconded. So we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Okay, that's unanimous. So we can now vote on the original motion as amended. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you. Well done, everybody. Thank you very much. And we'll now move on to the final agenda item, you'll be happy to know, which is the end for most of you, but myself, Caroline, Tim and John have to do another meeting after this as well. So I do have tea and coffee upstairs, so it's all right. So we'll move on to agenda item 14, Quarter 3, Period 8, 2024-2025 Finance Outturn Report. This report presents information and analysis to the Committee on the Council's financial performance against the reapproved budget and its forecast use of resources for the financial year 24-25. The report also informs the Committee on the delivery of planned savings in this financial year 24-25. Most of the recommendations in this report offer noting, but there is one key decision as set out in relation to the revised capital budget. And I'd like to invite Andy Rothery, Director of Finance, to introduce and outline the report. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just walk through a few of the headlines for the committee. So the P8 report is from the forecast to the 30th of November. So it's taking actuals to that point and then projecting forward to the end of the financial year. So what's been reported is consistent with previous finance reports to the committee. It is a continued overspending of around 17.5 million. So just to break that down a bit more, that the headline overspending across the council's revenue budgets is about 33.8 million, and the corporate mitigations of around 16.3 million. But what's really driving those core cost pressures across a range of areas includes children education, so about 22 million of pressures, and that's as a result of complex social care placements, and also increasing demand. And the number of outer area placements, they're higher cost than in area. So, there's a competitive market out there that's driving cost up. It's just something I wanted to make the committee aware of. Also across adults and communities, about 7.6 million. And this again is complex high cost care packages. And across growth and regeneration, around 3.4 million. And this is a consistent area of overspending that's been felt for probably a number of years now. I've also experienced it in my previous council over in Bath. It's temporary accommodation. So, this is really support to people in need of temporary accommodation. There's a demand that's higher than the available capacity that's driving up cost, where use of bed and breakfast in hotels is more expensive than kind of council-provided accommodation. So there are a number of very known cost pressures, and there's a lot of work that's been underway to really contain that. And so I am happy to report in my first S&R committee that the overspending has been contained, and that's been very much down to work that's been underway across the council around spending panels, looking at all spend decisions, all new contracts over £100,000, and also really controlling vacancies as well. However, there is more work to do to bring the budget into balance by the end of the financial year. So they're the main points on the revenue budget. I do want to touch on savings performance also. You'll note in the report that out of £49.5 million of savings, forecast delivery is about 37.2, so there was about 12 million or so of risk in savings delivery. Some of these will roll forwards in the budget, other ones have been recognised and been taken into account in terms of rebasing and pressures in the 25-26 budget also, but we do need to keep the focus on getting that performance up on savings. So I'll just move on from the main revenue budget across to the DSG. So the report highlights that the forecast overspend primarily on the DSG around the safety valve and the SCND placements is about 32.6 million over the budget of 491 million. This is partially mitigated down by the payments that we get from the DFE as part of the safety valve agreement. So there's a £16 million payment in year. However, the cumulative deficit is forecast to be around £53 million. But without the money from the safety valve, it would be a deficit of £91 million. So it does show that being in the safety valve will have a benefit. However, there's a very strict timetable and plan we now need to hold the council to in terms of delivery to start bringing things back into the DSG balance. So just to start wrapping up, just a few comments on the HRA. So the forecast on the HRA is around £13 million or £40 million over budget. This is a range of areas. In the main, just general staffing pressures across the HRA as a result of some of the compliance issues that are being managed at the moment, and also R&M spend and some of the income generation is slipping. Just a final few comments on capital also. So you'll note in the report there is slippage against the capital programme of around 33.2 million on the main programme, and then there's a bit of additional slippage on the corporate capital contingency. That, in a way, whilst it is slippage, does overall help the revenue budget because we're not taking out as much borrowing, so that is helping some of those corporate mitigations as well because we're not paying high interest rates on that borrowing. So whilst those schemes will be delivered in the short term, that is a bit of mitigation. Just final one to note in the papers also, there is a key decision for the acceptance of a 600k community recovery grant that's been awarded through MHCLG. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Any comments or questions? Councillor Whippington.
Thank you, Andy. Welcome to your first Strategy and Resources meeting. Hope you've enjoyed it. Page 213 of the report, and about the HRA, it says acquisitions programme forecast slippage on slowing down the acquisitions programme in the current year. The acquisitions programme is obviously designed to increase our council housing stock as a quick way of being able to get some more council housing. Are we slowing down the acquisitions programme, or are we actually scrapping it altogether?
whilst I'm not the obviously the lead officer on this one, my understanding is that the programme needs to be looked at longer term. So over the life of the business plan, acquisitions will continue. However, some of the direct work within the HRA is around compliance of the current stock.
Sorry, Tim, I thought we were going to have another question then. Any other questions or comments? Okay, in that case, Andy, you obviously stunned everybody with your first report to Strategy and Resources. So there are 9 items for noting, so bear with me. So I'd like to ask that the committee notes 1, the Council's General Fund forecast outturn revenue overspend of 17.5 million at Q3 P8 24-25 against the Council approved budget of 533.7 million. 2, the performance on delivery of savings, which is highlighted in Appendix A1A, Section 4, Tables 4A and 4B. 3, the additional weighted net risk of £5 million per the Risk and Opportunities Register. 4, the Council's outturn position of 13.2 million overspend within the Housing Revenue account to be transferred to the HRA General Reserve at the year end. 5, the Council's outturn position of a 32.7 million overspend, net 16.1 million, in the dedicated SCURS grant, and that this brings the carry forward deficit to 91.3 million. Following the application of the DFE's 24-25 safety valve, combined with contribution from the General Fund, a total of 53.2 million is forecast to be carried forward at the year end in the DSG deficit reserve. 6, the break-even position on public health services. 7, the break-even position on the Bristol Harbour Fund. 8, the Council's forecast underspend of 40.8 million against the capital programme revised budget 24-25, comprised of £8.8 million underspend on the General Fund, including £7.5 million underspend on corporate contingency and funds, and £32.0 million underspend on the HRA. 9, the finance urgent key decision number 38 to accept and spend 0.6 million community fund recovery monies before the 31st of March 2025. Can I take those items as noted? Thank you. And then finally, there is one vote. So I move that the committee approves revisions to the revised capital budget to incorporate the reprofiling of up to £32 million HRA budget into future years following its forecast underspend at period 8. Can I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Okay, can I ask all those in favour to show their hands? Thank you. That's 6. All those against to show their hands. Thank you. That's 3. And there are no abstentions, so that carries 6 votes to 3. So thank you, everyone. We finally got to the end. For those of you who are allowed to go home, feel free to go home. For those of you who have to join me for the agenda setter meeting, I'll see you at, what time is it? 2:15? 2 minutes. All right, okay. All right. Well, we'll go straight into the other meeting. The meeting's upstairs on floor 2.